Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And in that world, the classic entrepreneurial spirit is greatly encouraged. How could it not? This channel and many others like it were founded in that spirit. It's not always for the sole purpose of making money or promoting products, but the sentiments are similar. This is our product/service. This is our offer to you, the consumer, within the greater marketplace. This basic exchange is a manifestation of our entrepreneurial dream. When done right, it's a beautiful thing. When done wrong, well, it can be both very ugly and very damaging. And because of that last part, it's become trendy in recent years to criticize and attack capitalism. You don't have to look too far for entire lectures dedicated to the evils, crimes, and exploitative practices of big business. And much of that information is general knowledge these days. But you also don't have to look too far for counterexamples, namely the good that capitalism offers. That entrepreneurial spirit that I just mentioned is one of them. It's what drove Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. They couldn't have pursued their respective visions in a communist, socialist, or authoritarian state. But rather than wade into that messy debate, I want to highlight another way our perceptions of capitalism manifest. Specifically, I want to offer a little scrutiny into two fictional characters from two popular TV shows, each of which embody a particular element of capitalism. One is Bob Belcher from the show Bob's Burgers, and the other is C. Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons. Both characters are products of capitalism within their respective shows. They also reflect the extremes of the capitalist system. One reflects the ugliest side of the business world, where the other reveals a genuine, heartfelt effort to build a better life within a capitalist system. Like most things, capitalism, especially with how it's portrayed in popular culture, exists on a wide spectrum. These two just happen to be on the extreme ends, and by analyzing those extremes, I like to think we can gain a little insight into what these characters reveal about this system. Recall, if you can, any protest that was even slightly critical of capitalism. Any outcry that bemoaned the greed, corruption, and exploitation of human workers. It doesn't have to be a full-blown communist revolution, it just has to protest the excesses of big business. Chances are, if you ask those protesters to describe the worst offenders of capitalism, they'll describe C. Montgomery Burns to the letter. Longtime fans of The Simpsons, like myself, wouldn't blame them. Mr. Burns is essentially a worst-case scenario for those who criticize capitalism. He's the ultimate boogeyman that this system can produce. He's not just greedy, he's cruel, callous, unfeeling, unloving, vindictive, petty, dishonest, and corrupt, and he relishes those traits. He embraces every one of those negative sentiments with sadistic glee. When he has a chance to enrich or empower himself, he takes it. No matter who he hurts or what he destroys, he does it without hesitation. He's an even worse version of Ebenezer Scrooge, minus the redemption story. And throughout the long history of The Simpsons, Mr. Burns' approach to business is not subtle. He despises unions. He bribes politicians and regulators. He exploits anyone in any way he can to either secure or expand his influence. From blocking out the sun to taking advantage of Cletus, the slack-jawed yokel, he has no limits. And given his advanced age, Mr. Burns also embodies the old school, old money, robber baron brand of capitalism. He's basically a wannabe John D. Rockefeller. He doesn't just want to win in the capitalist system. He wants to win to such an extent that he seeks to tweak the rules in his favor so no one else can win. The fact that Burns never gets held accountable for anything he does, be it his cruel conduct or his outright crimes, also reflects the extent of that corruption. The only thing that matters to him is power and profit. Anything else, including human life and the rules, is just an obstacle to overcome. He's the ultimate monster within capitalism's ugliest side. Like the bankers who never go to jail or the fraudsters who never get caught, he never faces any punishment for his crimes. People try to shame him, but that doesn't work on someone who has no conscience and no morals. Appeal to him and he's more likely to release the hounds rather than hear you out. If Mr. Burns is the ugliest face of capitalism's worst extremes, then Bob Belcher is its likable antithesis on the other side. He might not be the prettiest face, but he is the most relatable. This is the kind of guy you want to be friends with. He's the kind of guy you want to help out, and who, in turn, will help you out too. And it won't always be for the sake of profit. In a sense, Bob Belcher is the kind of guy that capitalism empowers in the best possible way. Now, the premise of the show isn't entirely about his business, but much of its structure is influenced by it. Bob's Burger is, after all, a family business. These are the kinds of businesses that capitalist lovers love to romanticize, like family farms, truck drivers, and shopping malls. But the show doesn't shy away from subverting that idealized notion. From the very first episode, it's clear that Bob's Burgers is not a successful enterprise. It's very small compared to other restaurants like it. It's poorly staffed, too. Bob has to employ the aid of his 3 children, Louise, Tina, and Jean. He just can't afford normal hourly workers. Despite the setup, he's frequently behind on rent payments. More than one episode has built stories around that. And yet, he still makes his business work. Even within this imperfect system, Bob finds a way to keep Bob's Burgers going. He has many forces working against him. His annoying competition, Jimmy Pesto, goes out of his way to harass him. His kids, especially Louise, rarely take their work seriously. Even his high-energy wife, Linda, often works against him, usually indirectly and never out of pure malice. And despite all these obstacles, Bob remains focused on his vision. He loves burgers. He loves cooking. He's not like Al Bundy, Homer Simpson, or Peter Griffin, characters who hate their jobs or just see it as an inconvenience. And he's not Hank Hill either, who gladly thrusts himself into the capitalist system, much to the benefit of his boss, who overtly exploits his workers. Bob's Burgers is Bob's business. It's not a job he has to do, it's something he wants to do. And he genuinely wants it to succeed beyond paying the rent on time. This personal vision just couldn't work in a non-capitalist system. He didn't come from money and didn't exploit anyone to get started. He just diligently follows the rules and works hard. And he regularly goes out of his way for his customers, even when they're obnoxious, namely Teddy. Bob is everything you'd want in an ethical capitalist. He's an aspiring businessman who seeks his own unique vision within the system. Granted, it hasn't made him obscenely rich, but it's still his vision, and it happens to provide a valuable service to his customers, namely delicious burgers. No matter what your ideology, he's the kind of capitalist you can root for. By definition, Bob Belcher and Montgomery Burns are capitalists. They're each operating within a capitalist system, and yet their personalities, motivations, and actions are so vastly different. That says as much about them as characters as it does about the system they're working in. Being archetypes within a capitalistic world, their tendencies are bound to get exaggerated. That's just the nature of story structure and long-running TV shows. But those exaggerated behaviors help define their roles within their respective shows. They also convey an even larger message about operating within a modern capitalist system. Despite his age and aesthetics, Mr. Burns functions comfortably in the current neoliberal capitalist setup. He's not completely unbound by regulation like the capitalist robber barons of old, but he does easily work around these regulations. And even when he's caught, it's rarely more than an inconvenience for him. At most, he pays a fine. Like most other big business types, nobody ever goes to jail or faces any serious personal consequences. Now that's a serious flaw in the system, but one the Simpsons play up for comedic effect. Mr. Burns is just so cartoonishly evil that it's the only way an audience can process his deplorable behavior. Take away that comedic effect, and you're just left with a greedy asshole sociopath. That may work for King Joffrey, but not for Mr. Burns. That capitalist system has to be in place for him to work within the show. Bob's Burgers doesn't hide those systemic flaws either. In fact, it highlights them in a similar way, and with plenty comedic undertones. Given Bob's lower station in this neoliberal capitalist system, he struggles with its many obstacles. He deals with vindictive health inspectors who want to sleep with his wife. He deals with Jimmy Pesto, who always seems to be ahead in terms of customers, sales, and business savvy. And many of these issues are things Bob can't control, and he's often powerless to avoid them. Whereas Mr. Burns can just lie, cheat, or bribe his way out of anything, Bob has to do things the hard way. Even when he has a chance to be corrupt or unscrupulous, he rarely chooses to do so, something that his kids tend to struggle with more often than not. There are even a few times when Louise gets dangerously close to acting like Mr. Burns. See the episode The Fresh Principal in Season 9 for a good example. His struggles within the system manifest in many conflicts and characters throughout the show, but the most common manifestation comes in the form of Mr. Fischoeder, the colorful yet aloof landlord of the wharf. While Mr. Fisher is no Mr. Burns, he's frequently an antagonist to both the Belcher family and anyone who owes him rent. On many occasions, he conducts himself with little regard to the struggles of others. He pays lip service to the notions of fairness, and he doesn't hesitate to exploit others for his own benefit, even if that benefit is as simple as his own amusement. He's never outright evil. He's not even overtly corrupt. He just casually bends the rules within the system, but doesn't overtly break them. He's a perfect blend of a corrupt banker and an unscrupulous landlord, two caricatures that reflect actual weak points within the current capitalist system. He's not an extreme, but he is more believable, which is what makes him work both as a character within the show and as a cautionary tale for the system at large. I know I keep using terms like system and capitalism in an overly broad sense, but that's kind of necessary given the complexities of both story structure and economics. Yes, The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers don't accurately represent how real-world economics operate. They're cartoons. That shouldn't be necessary to say outright, but I'll say it anyways. However, these unrealistic depictions of capitalism and big business helps mold a larger message, and it's a message worth heeding. The message in The Simpsons isn't really subtle. The show has a long history of being laughably overt in how it conveys its larger themes throughout the story. Mr. Burns is an evil, greedy sociopath because the system enables him. It's structured in a way to ensure that he stays rich, remains powerful, and keeps getting away with gross exploitations. Even when he ventures outside that system, it still accommodates him. If flashbacks are any indication, relative to the messy and inconsistent timeline of The Simpsons, he was a monster long before he went into business. The system did not make him cruel. His cruelty is what helped him succeed within that system. Even in episodes like The Old Man and Lisa, in which he loses all his money, he still ends up making it all back, again by being a greedy, exploitative asshole. The greater message there is, within this capitalist system, being a monstrous sociopath is a key path to success. It's not a good message, but one that tends to get obscured by Mr. Burns' cartoonish evil. That makes it easier to hate him rather than the system that enables him. The message in Bob's Burgers is a bit different and a lot more subtle. The show rarely paints the current capitalist system as entirely unfair, but it is exceedingly difficult to work within. It also sends the message that it pays to be a little callous. Mr. Fisher is proof of that. But in certain instances, it does show that it's possible to succeed in this system, it's just challenging and often requires compromise. In one particular episode, Pro Tiki Con Tiki, Bob meets his old friend, Warren Fitzgerald. Unlike Bob, Warren is very successful, but he's not Mr. Burns. He's successful because he made good business decisions and got extremely lucky. Two powerful but understated forces within modern capitalism. See the early investors in Facebook and Amazon for proof of that. But when he offers to make Bob's restaurant a success, he nearly succeeds. For a while, it looks like Bob might finally have a thriving business. However, it wouldn't have been his business anymore. To get that success, he has to make changes that he doesn't want to make. He also has to compromise the one thing he's actually passionate about, his burgers. His idea of success involves more substance rather than style. He seeks to succeed on the quality of his product rather than the packaging. Whereas Mr. Burns could care less about what brand his products are, that element matters to Bob. Like Hank Hill from King of the Hill, he actually cares about satisfying his customers, as any ideal capitalist ought to. That shouldn't seem like such a radical notion within any capitalist system, and yet within this current system, it might as well be revolutionary. In a world of perfectly just capitalism, Bob Belcher would already be a success. But the show makes it very clear that this is not the world he lives in. The system has many obstacles in his path. Some he can control, and some of which don't depend on the quality of his burgers. And some of those obstacles have nothing to do with economics. His own family, friends, and customers often confound his drive for success. And that's why he's so easy to root for. That's also why the show works so well. He's the kind of underdog, bootstrap-loving capitalist that we love to cheer on. This is someone who, if he becomes the next Ray Kroc, we'd celebrate. That's because he struggled, fought for, and earned that success. Conversely, Mr. Burns didn't necessarily earn anything. He took it with ruthless, unfeeling force. He bullied, bribed, and backstabbed his way to the top, breaking rules, avoiding consequences, and exploiting everyone along the way. Worst of all, the system both enables and rewards him. He's now at a point where nobody can stop him and he has no reason to change. In a capitalist system, both stories are possible. Each show just gives those stories an appropriate face. That in and of itself is a testament to the sheer breadth and complexity of economics. Whether you call it capitalist, socialist, or Marxist, it's a remarkable system, one that brings out the best and worst in people. These shows nicely demonstrate why we should keep scrutinizing this system, and, ideally, improve it. This world has enough C. Montgomery Burns. We need more Bob Belchers, and not just for the delicious burgers. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thanks for joining me in my world. Bob makes burgers, I make videos. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Take care, and stay safe.